This is a Lip Media podcast.
You're listening to All the Shit I've Learned Abroad. I'm Andrea Gillis.
And I'm Steph Page. We're two Canadian expats now living in Australia and the UK.
Between the two of us, we've been through the ringer in our travels, experiencing missed flights, volcanic eruptions, and even a terrorist attack.
It's not all that extreme, though. We've also experienced heartwarming, life-changing moments and met amazing people along the way. So kick back and listen to all the shit I've learned abroad.
Welcome to another episode of All the Shit I've Learned Abroad. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Steph.
Hi, Steph.
Hey.
We have a shout-out to give. A Patreon shout-out.
Yeah, can I just tell you, I got really excited when I saw this name this week because I already loved this woman and her podcast. Mm-hmm. So, new Patreon donor, thank you so much, Lauren Butterworth of the Deviant Women podcast.
Thanks, Lauren.
You are awesome. So, I got really excited because I saw this the same day their episode came out. So, I was listening to their episode and then Patreon emailed me. I was like, what? She was thinking of me as I was thinking. Well, she was thinking of us. Sorry, I just got really like.
Whoa, yeah.
There.
All right, Steph. This is a team effort. But yeah, if you guys haven't listened to Deviant Women yet, do it. Mm-hmm. It's one of our favorite podcasts. It's also on Lip Media, the same network that we're on, and it's
They
it's great.
tell badass stories of badass women throughout history, and I'm not talking. A lot of times when you hear stories about badass women, they're in the past 100 or so years. They take it way back, like women who were well before their time.
Yeah. Give it a listen.
It's awesome.
It's great. Okay, Steph, I have a question for you.
Hit me with it.
What is the first word you think of when you think of Canada? Go, quick.
Big. Big,
yes!
big.
I was thinking that was going to take a few tries. I thought you were going to say a bunch of other stuff like home and, I don't know, like beaver. But no, you did it big. Yeah.
Oh,
Canada is Canada's massive.
Second biggest country in the world.
Yes.
Just saying.
Not by population, can I just add. We
no.
are nowhere
physically.
near. Yeah, we have about 7 people that live there. But so, yeah, we've got the big mountains. We've got the big lakes. We've got the big forests. And in this week's episode, we wanted to pay homage to our home country where Steph and I are from in Canada. Now, as much as we love the big lakes and the big mountains and the beautiful scenery, we're actually going to talk about other big things in Canada. Steph,
what are we?
What big? Oh God, there's going to be way too many innuendos in this episode, isn't there?
So I will give a little shout out because this episode suggestion did come from our listener, Jonathan, who said we often refer to Canada a lot as, a home country because it's not exotic to us. It's not foreign to us. And he was like, hey, what about all your listeners who aren't from Canada? Canada is exotic to us. Like, tell us some cool stuff about Canada.
Yeah.
And me and you, one of the first things that came to mind is corny ass shit. So we're not talking the beautiful mountains or the beautiful lakes or the plethora of beauty that Canada has. We are talking about big ass things that people have built all across Canada.
So basically what we're talking about today, and this just came to mind because it's one of mine and Steph's favorite things to do.
I love it.
Steph is like weirdly obsessed with giant sculptures and things. And Canada has a lot of them. Like, and we're talking those really cheesy roadside attractions, like structures and sculptures. And when we looked into this, so Steph and I have been to quite a few of these.
I was shocked.
Yeah, Steph more than I have. But we did some research on this, and we have some honorable sort of mentions that we're going to go through in this episode of places we haven't been that we want to. Mm-hmm. But holy shit, Canada has... I'm talking like there's got to be like at least 100 giant sculptures. What would you even call these? Are these like roadside attractions?
Yeah, roadside attraction sounds raunchy, but I like it.
Yeah. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And for anyone that ever wants to do a road trip across Canada, add this onto your list of things to see along the way, along with the mountains and the trees. And I mean, you'll find when you drive across Canada, there's a lot of scenery and you get bored of just looking at trees and lakes and land all day. So we've got a list for you.
Yes. And I'm going to take it back because my obsession with big things goes way back. So I don't know if any of our listeners will remember this. I don't know if you've even seen it or if you even, I don't even think I've told you this. My obsession with big things starts from, there was a movie that came out in 1996 called Michael. Do you remember it?
Nope, never heard of it.
Okay, it starred John Travolta. It's really weird. It's one of those movies where I was 11 or 12 when I saw it and probably did not understand almost any of the adult humor jokes or anything that was in it.
Yeah,
connotations. But so it's the basic premise is this guy says he's an angel. 2 reporters are sent out to follow him, and they figure he is an angel. They're doing a story on him, and they go on a road trip with him, and he is obsessed with seeing the world's biggest thing. So he stops at the world's biggest frying pan, the world's biggest ball of tweed or twine, like really weird things. But for some reason, as a kid, I was like, I want to do that. Like, this looks like the best thing in the world.
And thankfully, you were from a country where, for whatever reason, I mean,
we got some big shit.
Do you think it's because in Canada we have so much space that we've decided to fill that space with giant sculptures? I mean, could that be why? We have a lot of space.
And I mean, we're gonna crack a lot of jokes about these things in this episode, I feel like. But to be honest, I think there's so many little small towns that people drive by and never notice. So what they do as a town is they build, this massive thing that brings the tourists into their town. It pulls them off the highway when they're driving. And it brings money, dollars, business into their town, which they need. So it's like, they're super corny and really gimmicky, and I love them, but they actually serve an economic purpose as well.
And it works. And as I said, if you're doing a road trip through Canada, you need a break. I mean, it takes days to drive across the country. So yeah, put some of these on your list. You can make little stops on the way. So let's go into the first one then. What's the first one on our list, Steph?
Well, I mean, should we start to our first one? The first one we've seen together?
I think this is the only one we have seen together.
So the first one we saw together was in Sudbury, Ontario, and it is the Big Nickel.
The Big Nickel, yes. Shall I give a bit of history behind the Big Nickel?
Well, give the history, but I'll just say first that for anyone who's wondering what this is, you missed the plot already, because it is just a big fucking nickel. So these things are aptly named.
Right. The nickel is our 5-cent coin in Canada. So we should, it's not just like a hunk of the actual metal nickel. It's a replica from the 1951 nickel. How this kind of happened, I did some research on this, and it was back in the 60s, and it was the city of Sudbury. They put forward a contest for Sudbury residents, how they should celebrate Canada's centennial that was going to be happening in 1967. So this guy, he put forward the idea of this giant nickel, again, this 5-cent coin. And for those of you that aren't familiar with the 5-cent coin, it's got the big national animal on there, which is the beaver. But at the time, it wasn't the national animal. That didn't happen until the 70s, regardless. So anyways, this guy puts it forward, and this city comes back, and they're like, you're crazy. This isn't happening. That's ridiculous. But he loved the idea so much that he commissioned it himself. And he was like, I'm going to get this nickel built. Anyways, so he bought the piece of land, or he leased it. But then the city was refusing to give him a building permit for it. So eventually he managed to get it built. So it was like a big project. And this guy had this vision for it. Like, could you imagine having a vision for a giant coin to put up?
Yeah, I can, but we'll get to that later.
Yeah. And the reason for the nickel, Sudbury became an established city because of its nickel mines. So that's the reason behind it. It wasn't just a sort of random, like, hey, let's put a 5-cent coin up. So yeah, eventually this guy got his way, and the Big Nickel was erected, and it's been there ever since. Steph, do you know how big the nickel is? I don't even have...
Well, I remember being under it, and it was massive.
It's huge.
So it was one of those ones where my jaw definitely dropped, and it is 9 meters or 30 feet, depending on what, which is your jam. It is massive, and you stand under it. And I remember when you and I went to it, it was fantastic, because you and I were driving from Brantford, Ontario to Manitoulin Island. Right. And on that road trip, this is back when you and I were dirt poor.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I don't even know how we went anywhere. I'm pretty sure our parents probably just gave us enough for a tank of gas, and we just would pick somewhere to go.
I actually remember that summer. This is how broke we were. I'm pretty sure we siphoned gas a couple times. We did.
We did.
did.
Not entirely successfully, but
No,
we definitely
genuinely grabbed. And I think we just did this because we thought we were hilarious. But
we were hoodlums.
We definitely tried to siphon gas out of cars.
And I'm pretty sure you're saying we, but you were there, and I was actually the one sucking on the.
Steph was sucking So our trip up to the Big Nickel, I don't think it was our parents. That was definitely siphoned gas. So sorry to whoever we stole petrol from. We were what, like 17, young and dumb.
I did not think that was coming out in this episode. I'm actually burning up red now. Yeah,
it happened.
We
Guys,
did that.
Don't steal gas. Don't steal anything. But when you grow up in rural Southern Ontario, that's what you do.
Live and learn.
Anyways, okay, back to the Big Nickel.
Yes. So you kind of hit, that was the point, is we were just so broke. We were going on road trips of like scraping by. Yeah. And I just remember, we weren't even planning on going there, but we were driving through Sudbury and we're like, hey, isn't this where the Big Nickel is? We're like, let's see if we... Yeah.
I was just going to say the irony of how broke we were, and then we were going to go visit a giant nickel.
Well, I mean, it's either ironic or it's very fitting considering we only probably had nickels.
True.
But I remember you and we were like, we're driving through Sudbury. That's where that Big Nickel thing is. Let's just like pull off and see if we can find it. And we were honestly thinking, this is back in the MapQuest days, not GPS on your phone. So we're like, well, how will we find it? And we get off the exit and it's like Big Nickel Road that way. Follow this sign to the Big Nickel. And we're like, okay, it's pretty idiot proof. And we get there, and the Big Nickel is sitting on the top of a massive hill. So you got to drive up. You got to drive through a gate where the parking is $4. And you and I were like, $4? Like, we're just going to take a photo and come back.
We don't have $4.
We genuinely didn't have $4. And the woman, bless her heart, she was like, just go.
Yeah.
She lifted the gate up for us. And I'm paying it forward now in my life for like other people.
And we're paying it forward for the stolen gas, can I just say.
But yeah, the Big Nickel was awesome. It was one of the ones that genuinely floored me. I was really impressed by it.
There you go. Was that the start of your giant things in Canada journey?
I think it might have been. I mean, I've had a lot of journeys start with you. They start and end with Andrea.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, it definitely was. And then, you know what? There's one I'm pretty sure you and I both saw beforehand.
Which one?
The flower clock at Niagara Falls.
I don't know if I've seen the flower clock, but
you've seen it.
I mean,
I put my life on it.
The only times I've ever really been in Niagara Falls have been very like sloppy drunken nights, gambling at the casinos.
Oh.
Or in like really like divey strip clubs with like male friends.
Oh my gosh. I go to Niagara Falls to like see the monuments and read the plaques and like learn about the battle history there.
We have very different types of trips to Niagara Falls then, I guess. But yeah, tell us about the giant clock.
It's literally a giant flower clock. It's just flowers. It's a huge clock. It's not quite 13 meters wide, like massive. It's bigger than the Big Nickel, but yeah, it's a flower clock.
I've probably walked by it in my drunken haze. And
Andrea.
I don't know. I'll have to go back. I've been to Niagara Falls so many times, but one that comes to mind though. So this is one I think you and I have both seen, and I remember driving by this as a kid. It's the Big Apple.
Yes.
In Colborne, Ontario. So Colborne is a small city, town. I don't know which status it gets, but
I've only stopped at the Apple.
And this is basically, this is
It's not near where we grew up. It's like it's on the way to Ottawa. Like the Kingston area.
Well, sorry, I'm originally from Ottawa, so I remember driving by this as a kid. That's sense. What I meant. Yeah. I was not born in Brantford.
Well, look at you dusting that dirt off your shoulder.
Yeah, it's a Big Apple. So it opened in the 80s, the late 80s, 1987. This is basically a giant venue. So you go inside, and it's like a shop where they sell like apple goods and apple crumble and apple cider and
apple fritters.
And they've basically erected this giant apple venue structure to, again, bring people in from the side of the road. So you drive by and it's huge. And I remember as a kid, I used to think that this Big Apple, I used to think that was New York City. Because you hear,
Yeah.
obviously New York City is the Big Apple. And so I remember being like 4 or 5 and I'm like, oh, there's New York City. And that's what I used to think was New York City.
That was the Big Apple.
a Big Apple in Ontario. Have you, Steph, you've been there before, haven't you?
I have, yeah, on multiple road trips to Ottawa and back. Because the one thing that's good about that apple is that you can see it from the road. But you can just see it. So you just see it. You're like, oh, that's interesting. Let's pull over and take a photo. And people pull over, they get out. And at that point, you know, there's apple cider, apple juice, all the apple things. So you spend money. So it's brilliant. I've been there, got the photo, ticked off the Big Things Canada list for sure.
Right. And this is not to be confused with New York City, guys. It's not New York City. It has its similarities. I get it. It's a giant apple with a big smiley face on it in the middle
That's definitely what New York City is.
Yeah, in like the middle of an open field. That's the other thing, because I think you can go in, and I think you can pay to like go to the top. It's like 10 meters high, so you can walk to like there's like an observatory or whatever you call it at the top, and it's like, oh, see the views of Colborne, Ontario. And, like, I don't really know what you're looking at when you're up there because you are kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Is that true?
Yeah, you can go to the top.
Okay. I didn't know you could go to the top.
Yeah.
I don't know why I whispered there. I doubted you, and I, like, whispered as if the
can.
podcast listeners wouldn't hear me say that.
Yeah, no, they can hear you. You are mic'd up. Yeah, you can go up and see the, I don't know. I mean, I don't think we ever did it when I was a kid, but I don't know what you're looking at because there's nothing.
It's
like there's
nothing
nothing around. It's like in a field. I mean, as most things are in Canada, just in the middle of fields.
So segueing from that, because we're going from our first big things, you know, as adults on our own, to our first big things as children. Do you know what the last big thing I saw in Canada was?
Okay, wait. There's definitely a hilarious joke in here somewhere, but I'm not going to say it. So just tell me the real. What, Steph? What was the last big thing you saw in Canada?
It was actually up in Cochrane, Ontario, which is kind of.
Wait, where was it? Where?
Oh shit! It was in Cochrane, Ontario.
Oh, okay, yeah. So the last big thing you saw was in Cochrane. Okay, yeah.
They have a massive, giant polar bear.
Oh, that's very fitting for Canada.
So when I went home to Canada in July, August this year, it was really random. My sister's like, oh, you're coming to Canada. I was thinking of taking the kids on a road trip. Do you want to come with us? And I was like, yeah, for sure. I flew from Australia to Canada, so give or take 30 hours door to door, to then the next morning get in a car and drive 11 hours. I did not realize when I...
Which is like a daily commute in Canada, yeah.
So we drove north up to Cochrane, which is actually considered the subarctic. So you're just below the Arctic, which is, I didn't know, which I thought was fascinating. And there's polar bears everywhere there. There's about 2,000 polar bears that live in that region in the wild. But there's actually a polar bear sanctuary in Cochrane as well. So we were taking my nieces and nephew to the polar bear sanctuary where they could see them and learn about them. And yeah, just teach them about, you know, a different area. Ontario really gets this reputation of thinking we're the center of the universe in the Toronto area. And so just to teach them about, you know, other areas of Canada and what's happening there. So yeah, they have a giant polar bear.
Not a real polar bear though, right?
I mean, there's a real one and a fake one. And
the fake one is giant. How big is it?
Got the photos. So it is about 11 meters wide. Yeah. So
I also can't help but think every time you're saying Cochrane, it sounds like cock ring in my headphones.
Oh, I didn't. Yep, that's where I was.
So just to clarify, everyone, it's Cochrane. It's
Cochrane.
in Cochrane.
R-A-N-E.
And the biggest thing Steph saw recently was in
Cochrane.
Okay, as you would imagine in Canada, there's loads of big sculptures and big structures that are there because of Canadian history. But
yes.
Because we're such a diverse country, we do have statues. What do we want to call these? Structures? Like, what's the right word for this? Structures?
Roadside attractions. We already agreed on this.
All right. So we have other roadside attractions that are there to commemorate other cultures. And so one of them that I have been to in Alberta is the Vegreville egg. Steph, do you know what this egg is?
I think I have an image of it in my head, but it could be something totally different.
So it's essentially a giant Ukrainian-style Easter egg. And so it's along the Yellowhead Highway in Alberta. So this is a big, long highway. Again, like we said, if you're doing a road trip, you get these long sort of stretches of highways as you go through the country. So yeah, there's this it's just a giant Easter egg. It's the second biggest Ukrainian style Easter egg in the world. And do you want to know where the first one is, Steph?
In the Ukraine.
Yes, well done. So yeah, the first one's in the Ukraine. So in this area, they have a high Ukrainian population. And so in the 70s, they decided to erect this giant Ukrainian-style Easter egg to commemorate that. So
what did they do to the big thing? They erected it. You said they erected it.
Yes, they erected the big thing in 1975. So it's huge. It's 9 meters long. It's 3.5 stories high. And it's beautiful. I remember we went by it when I was a kid. And I remember when I was a kid, my parents were like, "Oh, it's a giant Easter egg," and I actually thought it was a big chocolate egg. So I was like, "Oh, look at Obviously, I was
stop
a
here,
dumb
Mom."
kid. There are other big monuments, big structures, roadside attractions in Canada that are not just
Canadian focused.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Steph,
I like that because actually, and one of the ones I really want to see that's on my Canadian bucket list, only because I'm a fatty and love food, is also in Alberta, and it's the big giant pierogi.
Oh yes, I've heard about the pierogi.
So there's this massive pierogi, and it went up in 1993, and it's in a little village in Alberta north of St. Paul called Glendon, and I feel like it's going to be a trip just to go there, but I hope everyone who's listening knows what a pierogi is. It is a delicious Eastern European kind of dumpling thing. Yeah. And a lot of people, even in the UK, people don't know what pierogies are. In Australia, no, I barely find anyone who knows what it is. And we grew up, I had a lot of Polish friends, but it's very
there's a big Polish community in Canada. And so I remember, when we grew up, we had quite a few Polish friends. I have a lot of Polish friends in Toronto. So, we basically grew up on pierogies as part of our childhood.
It's very Polish, Ukrainian, Hungarian kind of dish, but it is delicious.
Yeah.
And this story about this one actually makes me laugh so much because this is so... Sometimes, are you ever amazed how the world just functions because people don't think things through?
Well, this is the story of my life.
Yeah.
I don't know how I've survived 34 years. And
So they put up this massive monument of a pierogi, which is basically a dumpling. And if anyone has an image of a dumpling in their head, if you saw a massive statue of that, no one knew what the hell it was. People were coming up to this town.
If you've ever seen... a pierogi, yeah. It's a pretty plain, there's nothing really unique about it. It's a very beige-looking dumpling, filled with cheese or potatoes. Flour.
Cheese. It's very nondescript.
You go from, a fancy Ukrainian Easter egg that has all these beautiful colors and it's shiny to a giant beige dumpling.
Yeah. So no one knew what it was. So they had this big problem that they built this massive statue. So then they had to add a fork into the statue. And the fork is going, it looks like it's going through the pierogi. So people understood it was food on a fork. But I just think that's hilarious that I don't know how long it was like that, but for years people were getting there and what? They were like, what is this?
Why is this giant thing?
Yes. And now that everyone knows, they love it. And it's a pierogi cafe that's right there as well. So obviously they wanted to draw people in.
So does it also have a giant fork then? Do you think there's people going to see the giant fork versus the pierogi? Maybe since they put the fork in. Oh, okay.
No. We live in North America. We focus on the food and not the process.
Okay, got it. So
just shove it in.
Oh, I'm hungry for pierogies now.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of, was that Alberta you said?
That was Alberta. And can I just tell you, I am so glad, and I'm going to shout out to a bunch of different big things in Saskatchewan as well, because we did an episode a few weeks ago, and we cracked a couple jokes about Saskatchewan and Alberta, just about how there's nothing to do in those things. And we were joking. We were saying it in jest. But we did get some messages from listeners being like, hey, listen to your ladies' podcast. Love you, girls. There's definitely things to do in Saskatchewan. And I was like, oh.
Well, and we're on the topic of Alberta. And as Steph said, we say it in jest, nothing to do. But if you go through Alberta, you go through Drumheller. Drumheller is known for its dinosaur and fossil deposits. And it's referred to as Dinosaur Valley. And I remember actually going there as a kid. And it's fucking cool. This is, it's like the Badlands of Alberta. And when you're known for having dinosaur and fossil deposits, what do you erect? What do you think they have there, Steph, that's giant?
What do you think I erect?
They have a giant dinosaur. It's the world's largest dinosaur, and it's a giant T-Rex, which totally is fitting.
That's so random, but yeah, that makes sense.
But this T-Rex, it's like 86 feet high. So it's about 4 times the size of what an actual T-Rex size would have been when they roamed the earth. But it's really cool. You can also climb to the top. I'm assuming you have to pay, but you can go in and look out the dinosaur's mouth and look down. And it's like, yeah, it's really cool. But it's a huge T-Rex. It's very Jurassic Park. And I would say if you are driving through Alberta, you need to stop at the Badlands.
Can I just tell you, as you were saying that, I pulled it up in front of me. Do you know how big it is? It's 25 meters.
Yeah, it's huge.
That's huge. Most of the big things we're talking about are like 5 to 12 meters.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah, 86 feet.
Jesus.
Yeah. Imagine climbing that dinosaur.
He's a big fella.
Right?
Nice. I love it. And I'm going to shout out to a couple of the Saskatchewan ones I want to see.
Yeah, let's go to Saskatchewan now. What do we have over there?
Okay, so there's a lumberjack, very Canadian, but he's like old school, kind of not your metrosexual kind of lumberjack. Like he's your gritty, I'm going to go chop the tree lumberjack of the
That's
olden
my
days.
kind of lumberjack.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't like those clean ones with, the clean edges on their beard and no.
Yeah, no.
Rough around the edges.
His name is Gus. He's 20 feet tall.
20 feet tall. So that's generally, as a 6 foot tall woman, that's generally what I look for in a man.
Oh,
so
that's your man. That's definitely your man.
Okay. All right.
There is a pot and coffee cup, like a random 24 foot tall pot of coffee.
What's the relevance? It's not like coffee beans come from Saskatchewan, or do they?
So I looked it up. No, I have no idea. I have no idea. And then there's a 22 foot tall woman who perhaps we need to introduce to our lumberjack.
Is it me? Did someone make a statue of me?
Yes, you're 24 feet tall and very impressive.
Yes. I'm a roadside attraction, finally.
Andrea, you are already a roadside attraction.
Hey.
But it's actually a big monument in honor, to the Ukrainian and Eastern Europeans who have settled out that way.
We have a lot of Ukrainian and Eastern European and Polish structures.
Yeah,
I like that. It just shows our diversity in Canada.
Yep.
Yeah, we haven't seen all of these roadside attractions, but I definitely have some on my list and I know, Steph, you and I have talked about doing a Canadian road trip one day, and I feel like we should tie this in. We should do like a road trip where we see all these giant things. But one of them I really want to see is there is a giant fiddle in Cape Breton in Nova Scotia. Now, this is Eastern Canada, so this is like as east as you can kind of go in Canada. And so Nova Scotia is known for its traditional Celtic fiddle music, and this was from the thousands of Scottish immigrants that traveled there in the 18th century. So this is actually my family. So on my dad's side, they're of Scottish descent. So I feel like I've got a bit of a connection to this giant fiddle. And a fun fact, so there's a Celtic family band in Canada called the Rankin family, which I think is only, they'd only be known in Canada. I think as kids. Do you know who I'm talking about, Steph?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Canadian. What's the right word?
They're like Canadian legends when it comes to sort of that Celtic and like country style music. But they're from Nova Scotia, and they actually wrote a song called Gillis Mountain, and that's about my ancestors. So I've got some roots over there, and this giant fiddle, I feel like, commemorates part of my family. So we got to go see the fiddle.
I feel like you and I, for 10, 15 years, have talked about doing a Canadian road trip.
Yeah. Well, we should start there on the East Coast. I'll see the giant fiddle. I'll say hey to my Gillis family out there. We'll go to the Gillis Mountain. And I don't know how big this fiddle is, but it's a big old fiddle. I don't play. Steph, do you play the fiddle?
Do you think I play the fiddle?
Absolutely not. Could you learn how to play a giant fiddle?
I could strum that fiddle.
Okay. You don't strum a fiddle.
Isn't that what they call it? No?
It's like a violin. You play with
Yeah,
a bow.
you like string. Yeah, with the bow. You strum it with the bow.
No, you strum a guitar with your hands.
I
don't
swear to
know.
God, I'm right.
I don't think it's called strumming a fiddle. We'll look into this. Anyways.
Okay.
And then, some other honorable giant mentions that
Mm-hmm.
we should definitely go to is the giant beaver.
There's giant beavers in almost every province.
Yeah, but I think the biggest
Canada.
one, the biggest giant beaver, not including yours,
Beaver.
is it's in Beaver Lodge, Alberta. So another one in Alberta. And because the beaver, so again, I think I mentioned this earlier, but it's been our national animal in Canada since 1975. So why not erect a giant beaver? It's like 3 meters high. It's huge. Although I wonder, is that giant beaver bigger than the beaver that's on the Big Nickel? Because you know how we have the beaver on there?
It's a beaver showdown.
There's a lot of big beavers in Canada, guys.
That's why so many men migrate to Canada. I understand now.
There you go. And the other one, we talked about Saskatchewan, but we missed off Mac the Moose. So there's a giant moose in Moose Jaw. There is a place called Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. And Mac the Moose is 10 meters high. He's a big Mac.
I mean, have you ever seen a moose in person? They're pretty damn near close to 10 meters.
Like a real moose, they're giant.
I'm just going to jump into the one I'm really hoping to see soon because it looks like my next big trip is actually, of all places, going to be through the Canadian territories. For anyone outside of Canada, so we have 10 provinces, 3 territories, and the territories are the northern part where basically no one fucking lives.
I mean, people do, but it's just ice.
Right, but I mean, for a landmass that's the same size of Ontario, which is 13, maybe 14 million now. The population is 30,000, kind of to give you a scale idea here. But in Nunavut, a massive Inukshuk, and I am obsessed with Inukshuks.
Can we first explain what an Inukshuk is? Because not everyone listening is going to know.
I feel like everyone would know it to see one,
know
but
it
maybe
to
you
see
don't
it.
know the word and the history. So basically, it's a man-made stone landmark or sculpture, not sculpture, but whatever you really want to call it. It's man-made. It's made of stones. The roots of it are based in the Canadian Aboriginal people, and they're really found in like northern Canada, Greenland, Alaska, around the Arctic Circle. And historically, they were used for navigation. So they kind of pointed as a marker for travel routes, fishing places. And these stone structures can look like either people or animals pointing in certain directions.
And you still see them ever. I mean, Steph and I, when we did a road trip up to in northern Ontario, like, do you remember we kind of saw them everywhere there?
Yeah.
Driving along
the first time you and I saw them, I remember we were driving, they started happening everywhere, and we're like, what are these stone formations? We didn't know what they were called then.
Yeah, we called them rock formations.
Rock
which I
formations.
Guess it is formation of rocks, but quite clearly man-made. They didn't fall that way and land. Like, it's, yeah.
But they're just beautiful, and I think I enjoy them because I don't know, they're just sourced from they're very natural, even though they've been set up in a certain way. They have such an interesting history. They can, I mean, the description is the same, but every single one is so different. They're just very beautiful, and I love them. So I really want to go see the one that's in Nunavut. The only one I've seen really to date was actually with you at Toronto Pearson Airport.
There is a big one there, but I feel like the one in Nunavut is a lot bigger.
Oh, you can't even compare them. Yeah,
right.
It's huge. So that's what I really want to go see. And I was looking up to see, for my tour of the Northern Territories, what else was there. And I have got to say, the Yukon, I couldn't find a single big thing. No idea.
Why is the Yukon lacking? Because there's definitely other. I mean, we didn't even mention British Columbia, but there's. I know
we could go on for hours. We need to fit this into.
There's so many. Again, Steph and I didn't even realize how many big roadside attractions there were in Canada. There's a list that Steph and I found that we'll post that on our Instagram because there's like it categorizes it by the province or the territory, and you could definitely plan an entire road trip based off of this.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't look for it, but I bet you there's bloggers who already have like province road trips mapped out based on big things.
Oh well, guys, that's just our extensive big
Yes.
list.
Well, and I think how we should wrap this up is really the next big thing that's been going to be built in Canada. I don't know if you remember, but when you and I came home from the Big Nickel, we were pretty fucking inspired and drunk. And we came up with a plan to build Canada's biggest telephone.
Oh, in
And
Brantford.
And we were going to put it up in Brantford because Brantford is the telephone city where the first long distance call by Alexander Graham Bell was made. And we decided, and we had a whole plan to build Canada's biggest telephone.
Was this before or after we siphoned gas out of someone's car?
I mean, it would have been after because we got home and we were like super inspired by the Big Nickel. We're like, this is such a smart idea.
So is that actually happening, or are you just pulling my leg?
No, I'm just full of shit. Like, I mean, if you want to do it, go for it. But...
I mean, Brantford needs a giant telephone. I'm surprised that they don't have one already.
The only thing Brantford has at the moment is a massive Alexander Graham Bell
monument,
monument, which is very clearly a ripoff of
Abraham Lincoln.
Of the Lincoln Monument in Washington.
Yes, I used to think as a kid, I'm an idiot. Again, guys,
same. No, same.
Stupid as a kid. I used to think that was Abraham Lincoln, and I was always confused why there was a big monument of Abraham Lincoln in our small town of Brantford, Ontario.
That Abraham Lincoln, the Lincoln Monument, was in Brantford.
Same. Oh, I used to think I was so dumb as a kid. Oh, so it wasn't just me.
I just love a corny shit. See the big things, support the local communities.
Steph loves big things.
All the big things. Thanks for listening, all.
All right, get out there. See some big things, guys. All the Shit I've Learned Abroad is a travel podcast focused on anything and everything related to travel. You can listen to us on multiple platforms, from iTunes to Google Play Music and more. And with that, please, if you have a chance, give us a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever platform you listen on. That drives us up the charts and really, really helps us out. Want to support us on Patreon? Find us over at Shit I've Learned Abroad Pod, and donations start as low as just $1. Also, if you could follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Shit Abroad Pod, and Facebook by searching All the Shit I've Learned Abroad. Thanks so much for listening.